When Donald Trump raised that question about morality and how it fits into leadership, the moment carried more weight than many realized at first. Trump is someone who has always been known for his directness, for cutting through layers of politeness, to get straight to the point. By asking Barack Obama about morality in such a straightforward way, he touched on something that goes deeper than politics. It went right into the foundation of what leadership is supposed to be about. It wasn't just a question about decisions or policies. It was a question about conscience, about what drives a person when no one else is watching. Morality in leadership has always been one of the most complicated subjects for anyone in power. And Trump knew that by bringing it up, he was raising something that every leader struggles with. For Obama, the answer came back to the idea that morality cannot be separated from leadership. A president, or any person in a high position, is never making decisions in a vacuum. Every choice touches the lives of families, workers, children, and entire communities. That's why, when Obama reached for that line from the Bible, to whom much is given, much will be required, it struck a chord even with Trump, because it framed morality not as a suggestion or an afterthought, but as a requirement for anyone holding great responsibility. For Trump, that response offered a moment of reflection. He has built much of his life around boldness, ambition, and results. But in that instant, the conversation revealed another layer, that leadership is judged not only by how much one achieves, but also by the moral compass guiding those achievements. When Trump asked the question, some might have expected him to challenge or criticize Obama, but instead, he opened a space where the two men could step outside the usual arena of political sparring. The idea of morality in leadership became less about party lines, and more about the universal truth that anyone with influence is carrying a burden bigger than themselves. The reason that moment stayed with people is because morality in leadership often feels like the part no one wants to talk about openly. Politics usually highlights success, approval ratings, and legacy, but rarely does it slow down to ask, was it moral? Was it right? Trump giving voice to that question, and Obama responding with such a rooted principle, created a rare exchange, where both men confronted something timeless. Leadership is not simply about strategy or even intelligence. It's about choosing to anchor those abilities in something ethical. Trump's challenge pushed Obama to share a principle he lived by, but it also reflected back on Trump himself. The question itself showed that he was aware of how heavy leadership really is. He was not simply pressing for a debate point. He was probing into the heart of what it means to carry responsibility. That's why Obama's answer hit harder than expected, because morality is not something that can be measured by applause or by wealth. It is measured by whether decisions uplift or harm, whether power is used to serve or to dominate, and whether a leader is willing to put principle before personal gain. In that quiet moment, the two men revealed something important. Morality is not a weakness in leadership. It is its greatest strength. For Trump, who has spent a lifetime making deals and fighting battles in business and politics, the reminder that morality is what truly defines leadership seemed to settle in deeply. He didn't reply with his usual sharpness, because sometimes silence shows more than words ever could. It showed recognition, even respect, for the idea that no matter how powerful or confident a leader becomes, the moral weight behind every choice will always be the true measure of their leadership. When Obama quoted that verse about much being required from those to whom much is given, he wasn't just talking about morality in the abstract. He was pointing directly to the idea that power and responsibility are inseparable. That was something Trump himself could relate to, even if he didn't respond out loud in that moment. Throughout his career, Trump has dealt with the realities of influence, whether in business or politics. Having power means doors open that are closed to others, but it also means that every move is watched, judged, and often carries consequences, far beyond what people on the outside can see. Trump's question to Obama had been sharp and direct. How do you know what's right when the pressure is at its highest? It was the kind of question that came from someone who understood the weight of being the one expected to make the final call. In business, Trump had always been the one to sign the deal, to decide whether a project lived or died. In politics, that same reality takes on an even greater scale. Obama's answer, put it plainly, responsibility grows in direct proportion to the power one holds. The two cannot be separated. What made the moment striking is that it was not a clash of personalities, but almost a quiet recognition between two men who had both been in positions where every decision was magnified. For Obama, responsibility meant asking himself what effect his choices would have on ordinary families. For Trump, responsibility often meant owning the outcome, whether success or failure, and being willing to stand in front of critics when things didn't go as planned. Both understood that influence without accountability is reckless, but responsibility without courage can be paralyzing. The balance between those two forces is what defines real leadership. When Trump leaned back after hearing Obama's words, it wasn't a retreat, it was a moment of consideration. Trump has often been portrayed as someone who thrives on the energy of the fight. But here he showed something else, an understanding that responsibility weighs heavier than most people ever imagine. Even for someone with his boldness, That truth can't be ignored. Having power isn't just about shaping outcomes. It's about shouldering the blame, the judgment, and the impact that falls on those who didn't have a voice in the decision process. Obama's choice to use scripture framed responsibility in a way that transcended politics. It suggested that power, whether held by a president, a CEO, or anyone else in authority, is not really owned, it's borrowed, entrusted. That resonated with Trump more than people might assume. He had built his reputation on being a man who takes charge, but he also knew better than most that with every gain comes a cost. The bigger the platform, the bigger the responsibility to make decisions that don't just serve the moment, but leave a lasting imprint. Trump's single quotes own journey into politics highlighted this reality. When he became president, he inherited not just authority but the immense responsibility of leading a nation divided, of making choices that would ripple across the globe. In that room, hearing Obama describe responsibility as the inevitable companion of power, he was reminded that leadership is not measured by how loudly one speaks or how many victories are won, but by how responsibly that power is carried. There was a kind of unspoken agreement in the air between the two men. Even if neither said it out loud, power can be intoxicating, but responsibility is sobering. Trump's question and Obama's answer together painted the picture of what every leader eventually faces. The realization that power without responsibility is empty, and responsibility without courage is crushing. Trump, for all his confidence, recognized the truth in that balance, and it explained why his silence in that moment said more than any words could. When Obama responded to Trump's question with that single line from the Bible, the reaction in the room was not what anyone expected. People thought he would launch into a long explanation, perhaps a carefully measured defense of his choices. As president, instead he chose a verse that spoke volumes in only a handful of words. Trump, who has always been known for his fast responses and sharp comebacks, found himself pausing in a rare moment of quiet. The simplicity of the statement carried a weight that no debate or lengthy speech could have matched. It was an example of how surprising wisdom can emerge when least expected, shifting the atmosphere in ways that polished arguments rarely do. Trump had asked the kind of question that could have opened the door to political sparring. It could have turned into one of those back-and-forth exchanges where each side digs deeper into their usual points. But what Obama gave instead was something timeless, something that bypassed the surface level of politics. By quoting scripture, he reached for a truth that was older than both of them, a principle that didn't belong to one party or another. For Trump, it was disarming, because it wasn't an answer that could be argued against in the usual way. It didn't invite a rebuttal, it invited reflection. The surprising part of that moment was not only the choice of words, but the effect they had. Trump, who thrives on the energy of challenge and competition, recognized the power in the stillness that followed. Wisdom often comes not from piling on more words, but from knowing when fewer words carry more meaning. For someone like Trump, who built his life around boldness and commanding attention, seeing the strength and restraint was its own kind of lesson. It showed that sometimes, leadership is not about being the loudest voice, but about knowing when to let a truth stand on its own. What made Obama's answer even more striking was that it didn't glorify his own record, nor did it point fingers at anyone else. It was not about defending or justifying it was about principle. That kind of simplicity often leaves a deeper impression than the most detailed arguments. Trump, who had asked the question expecting some form of reasoning, found himself instead confronted with a truth that left no room for counterpoint. The wisdom of that moment wasn't in its cleverness, but in its clarity. Trump's reaction showed just how powerful that kind of unexpected wisdom can be. He didn't roll his eyes or push back. He didn't turn it into an argument about who was right or wrong. Instead, he leaned back, taking it in, and allowed the words to settle. That silence revealed something few people get to see, that even the most confident leaders can be moved when wisdom comes in an unexpected form. The fact that it left him without a quick response said more than any comeback could have. For Trump, who has spent his life in environments where quick wit and fast decisions are essential, the realization that a short, simple line could shift the entire tone of a conversation was meaningful. It demonstrated that wisdom doesn't always arrive dressed in complexity. Sometimes it's the straightforward reminders, the kind that cut through all the noise, that have the most lasting impact. Obama's choice to answer that way showed an understanding that leadership is not about winning every exchange, but about carrying timeless truths that others cannot easily dismiss. That moment also revealed something about Trump himself. Asking a question about morality was not a surface-level inquiry. It was a deeper probe into what guides a leader when the weight of responsibility is heavy. The fact that he respected the answer enough to sit with it quietly reflected that he recognized its value. Surprising wisdom has that effect. It doesn't need to be defended, and it doesn't need to be dressed up. It simply resonates, even with someone as quick-thinking and bold as Trump. The room may not have erupted in applause, but the silence that followed spoke volumes. Everyone present could feel that they had just witnessed an exchange that was different from the usual. Trump's willingness to ask and Obama's choice to answer in such a way created a moment where surprising wisdom became the most powerful force in the room. It showed that even in the world of politics, where words are often crafted for effect, sometimes the simplest words are the ones that leave the deepest mark. Asterisk. In that quiet exchange, what stood out most was not the difference between Trump and Obama, but the small piece of common ground that surfaced between them. These were two men who had sparred publicly, who represented very different styles and visions, yet in that moment they shared something unmistakably human. Trump's question had been raw and direct, asking about morality and leadership, while Obama's answer reached for a timeless principle. The fact that the two could meet in that space without trading barbs or pushing an agenda revealed a side of leadership people rarely get to see. It was a reminder that even rivals are still people, shaped by the same questions, carrying the same burdens, and bound by the same truths. Asterisk. Trump is known for his competitive edge and his willingness to challenge anyone who stands across from him. Obama is known for his measured tone and deliberate phrasing. Normally, those two approaches collide, but here, they balanced each other in a way that surprised everyone in the room. Trump asked a question many might have been too cautious to raise, and Obama responded in a way that disarmed tension rather than inflaming it. For a brief moment, the clash of personalities gave way to shared humanity, the kind that reminds people that underneath titles and positions, leaders face the same inner struggles that define all human lives. Asterisk. What made this so striking was that Trump didn't turn the exchange into a contest. He didn't take Obama's answer and twist it back into a political point. Instead, he allowed the meaning to stand. That choice in itself was a rare glimpse of respect, even admiration, for the deeper truth that had been spoken. Trump has always been someone who thrives on strength, on pushing harder and proving himself in every exchange. Yet here he showed a different kind of strength, the strength to pause, to listen, and to recognize that not every situation demands a counterattack. It was an acknowledgement that wisdom, wherever it comes from, deserves space. Asterisk. The shared humanity of that moment also showed in the silence that followed. People in the room sensed that they were witnessing something uncommon. To men, both symbols of their respective sides connecting over a simple acknowledgement of responsibility. It wasn't about policies or legacies. It wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was about the reality that leadership weighs heavily on anyone who holds it, and that morality, however one defines it, cannot be ignored. That understanding crosses every boundary, and it's one that Trump, even in his boldness, clearly understood in that instant. Asterisk. For Trump, this was also a reflection of his own journey. He has always been portrayed as someone who fights hard and never backs down, but this encounter showed that he is also capable of recognizing depth when it appears unexpectedly. Shared humanity does not erase differences, but it creates a space where respect can exist even in disagreement. Trump's reaction, or rather his restraint, was proof that he recognized that space. It was not weakness, it was recognition. Asterisk. Obama's response, drawn from scripture, was not meant to one-up Trump or silence him. It was simply an honest answer to a serious question. And Trump, by listening and allowing it to resonate, showed that he too was willing to meet the moment with honesty. This kind of exchange doesn't make headlines, but it reveals more about character than the staged battles people are used to seeing. It showed that both men, in their own ways, understood what it means to be entrusted with power and responsibility, and that this understanding binds even the fiercest of rivals. Asterisk. The beauty of that instant was in its simplicity. Trump, the challenger, and Obama, the responder, found themselves standing on the same ground, not as opponents locked in combat, but as leaders facing the same eternal truth. It was a reminder that beneath the surface of politics lies something deeper, a shared humanity that can bridge divides, even if only for a fleeting moment. That moment revealed that respect and recognition are possible, even when the world expects conflict. And sometimes, it's in those quiet acknowledgments that the truest picture of leadership is seen. Asterisk. As the evening drew to a close, the memory of that brief exchange lingered far longer than any of the other discussions. It wasn't the lengthy policy talks or the spirited debates that people carried with them. It was that single question from Trump and the simple response from Obama that stayed imprinted in their minds. In a world where conversations between public figures are often reduced to sound bites or arguments, what made this moment so powerful was its sincerity. Neither man was trying to score points, neither was trying to win a crowd. Instead, they had stumbled into something deeper, a reflection on what it truly means to lead. Asterisk. Trump's role in that moment was important because he was the one who opened the door. By asking the question, he revealed that even the boldest leaders wrestle with the idea of morality and responsibility. His straightforward style, often seen as combative, here became the very thing that sparked a moment of honesty. Obama's response in turn revealed that wisdom doesn't always need to be complicated. By reaching for a timeless truth, he offered something that could not be dismissed or argued away. It was as though the two men, so different in almost every respect, managed to carve out a small space of understanding between them. Asterisk. The silence that followed said more than any applause could. Trump's decision not to challenge or push back but instead to let the words breathe spoke volumes about the respect he felt in that instant. For a man known for never backing down, that pause revealed something rare: acknowledgement. It showed that even those who thrive on strength and confrontation can recognize the power of stillness when truth is spoken. That moment of quiet was not weakness, it was awareness. What this encounter demonstrated is that shared humanity has the ability to cut through division. Leaders may come from different parties, with different philosophies and approaches, but the weight of responsibility is universal. Trump, by asking the hard question, and Obama, by answering with simplicity, revealed that leadership is not ultimately about competition. It is about accountability to the people one serves and to the principles that outlast any single administration. In the end, the lasting impact of that evening was not about one man besting the other. It was about both of them stepping, however briefly, outside the roles that politics often forces them into and showing something genuine. For those who witnessed it, it was a reminder that beyond titles, beyond power, and beyond rivalry, leaders are human beings facing the same timeless truths. And sometimes, the greatest revelations don't come from grand speeches or fierce debates, but from a single question, a short answer, and the silence that follows when wisdom